Let's talk about Ben Shapiro. Right now, there's a power vacuum in the conservative pundit world. Previous regular staples like Bill O'Reilly and Rush Limbaugh are quickly and thankfully fading into irrelevance. Milo Yiannopoulos looked to be the right's new darling for much of this year, until we figured out that he was cozy with white supremacy, bad at putting on events, and that his trollish fans are full of shit.
I'm trying to have a debate.
Okay, then talk to me then.
Okay, well, I mean... Wait, you're young turds? Fuck that. Coward! Coward!
Just like the ass clown they follow.
I just said it to annoy people.
I basically called this before anyone else. Don't sleep. But Ben Shapiro has gradually built his own media empire. Like Milo, he's a Breitbart alum. But while Milo was ousted from the publication earlier this year after we found out about the whole pedophilia thing, Shapiro left after receiving a torrent of viciously anti-Semitic hate mail from Trump supporters. Shapiro wasn't shy of critiquing Trump, at least from a Breitbart perspective. Ben Shapiro is articulate, direct, unforgiving.
Why are people so afraid of you?
I don't know. I mean, I seem like a nice guy.
Strengths which have earned him a loyal following, making him the
Fastest growing conservative podcast in the nation.
as Shapiro will tell you himself in every episode, to one of those obligatory rock riffs that every conservative talk show has to have. But these conservatives flocking into Ben Shapiro, many of them young college students such as myself, find themselves with an identity crisis. They don't like Trump as the face of their party, but they're repulsed by this friggin' SJW's perception of the left that Ben Shapiro feeds into, inadvertently or not. So, being the open-minded person I genuinely try to be, I started listening to the Ben Shapiro podcast to see if the left had really met its match. And, on the October 17th episode, Ben Shapiro was talking about the #MeToo campaign that spawned from the Harvey Weinstein sexual assault allegations.
Sexual harassment is awful. Sexual harassment is evil. It's why I am supremely careful around women.
Okay, basic decency. Don't see that enough on the right. Okay, go on.
One of the problems that I have with the Me Too thing, we need to have some standards.
Oh, here we go. First of all, Ben, survivors of sexual violence don't need to explain their situation to your standards for their experiences to be valid. Second, it's called power dynamics. When your abuser is so well networked that they could make or break your career, it's hard to come out with your story. It's even harder to share your story when you might face scrutiny from the press or smear from your abuser. But mainly, Ben Shapiro, like most men, and honestly myself, were really slow to get the real meaning of the Me Too campaign. It's not enough for survivors to just tell their stories, it's about radically changing a culture that allows the Weinsteins, O'Reillys, and yes, Trumps from repeatedly getting away with sexual assault. It's also on men to make workspaces safer, which, to be fair, Ben Shapiro did mention. So he's problematic, but definitely far from the worst I've heard from a Republican all year. But it's about to get worse. In what seems to be a consistent pursuit to create plausible deniability around any wrongdoing by Trump, Ben Shapiro just constantly omits information that disproves his points. From November 3rd.
What Trump is doing here is certainly no worse than what President Obama did repeatedly with the IRS, where he kept saying that it'd be great if someone would go after these 501c3s, these conservative 501c3s, and then administrators at the IRS got the picture, and they went ahead and went after the conservative 501c3s.
So let me translate that. In 2013, the IRS revealed that it was going to take extra steps to make sure that organizations applying for tax-exempt status, colloquially and clunkily known as 501c3s or 501c4s, were not engaging in political activity. This tax exemption is meant to incentivize the work of charities, foundations, nonprofits, public and private. You just can't go into politics. To enforce this, the IRS searched for terms like Tea Party, Patriots, 9/12 Project, anything that mentioned making the US a better place to live, or any group that mentioned Obamacare, which does sound a lot like it's targeting the political right? Here comes that pesky context. They also use words like Occupy, progressive, medical marijuana. You get the picture. It wasn't just right-wing groups they were talking about, like Ben Shapiro suggested. So that was a great point, until you left out the evidence that would have made it a weak point, but okay. So I listened to the Ben Shapiro show for about 2 weeks, and it really wasn't hard to find instances where Ben conveniently left out the facts. I was gonna finish by going through a bunch of these cases rapid fire style, but then on Sunday, November 5th, at a church outside of San Antonio, Texas, a mass shooter used a rifle to murder 26 people. I wanted to check if Ben Shapiro had a conscience. Can you tell where this is going?
There are a lot of people who immediately jump to gun control, but one of the things that is important to recognize here is that it was an armed citizen, a guy with a gun, a good guy with a gun, who showed up to stop the bad guy with the gun.
Yeah, good thing that good guy with a gun stopped those 26 people from being murdered with a gun. Oh wait.
The reason that the NRA is so prominent is not because the gun industry is paying the NRA. It's because there are millions and millions of people who are members of the NRA who join voluntarily because maybe they're afraid that the left tries to grab guns and suggest that guns ought to be grabbed every time something bad happens.
Two things. One, from Business Insider. Gun manufacturing companies donate portions of sales directly to the NRA. Crimson Trace, which makes laser sights, donates 10% of each sale to the NRA. Taurus, another gun company, buys an NRA membership for everyone who buys one of their guns. Sturm Ruger gives $1 to the NRA for each gun sold, which amounts to millions. The NRA's revenues are intrinsically linked to the success of the gun business. Secondly, right now, at least on the federal level, private gun transactions don't require background checks. And this is the way that some, but not all, of these mass shooters get the weapons they weren't supposed to have. Closing the gun show loophole will save lives. And NRA members are on my side, not Ben's. A Johns Hopkins poll found that 73.7% of NRA members supported closing the gun show loophole. Same question in a CBS New York Times poll, 85%. Pew Research, 74%. As he wrapped up his coverage of this horrible massacre, he then needlessly decided to turn to another story that happened that weekend, where Rand Paul fractured 5 of his ribs in a dispute with his neighbor. Here he goes.
Is it useful to the left's agenda is more of a judge than is it newsworthy. You know, Bernie Sanders being tackled by a right-winger would be newsworthy. Rand Paul gets tackled, breaks 5 ribs on his own property, and by a Democrat, and nothing. I mean, I had to find this on Twitter. It wasn't even covered anywhere. It's ridiculous.
To quote Boucher's lawyer in a statement that came a little bit after Shapiro's show, the unfortunate occurrence of November 3rd has absolutely nothing to do with either his politics or political agendas. It was a very regrettable dispute between 2 neighbors over a matter that most people would regard as trivial. Never mind this sounds like an entertaining episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, but remember this the next time Ben Shapiro accuses the media of jumping to conclusions. And I know, we're all numb to gun violence in this country, but if you're gonna cover this story, here's how you do it right. In 310 days of 2017, there have been 378 mass shootings, defined by the FBI as 4 more gunshot injuries in a single incident. 6 of the 10 most violent mass shootings in US history have occurred in the past decade. 2 of them, so far, were in 2017. And this is to say nothing about the rampant gun violence happening in our inner cities that a lot of the media doesn't talk about. Republicans are only responding with platitudes and distraction. Obviously, you can't ban all guns. But why can't we, as a society, the only society on earth where this happens, look at all these mass shootings, try to identify patterns, and then from there create good, common sense gun reform? Oh, and maybe if it's a mental health issue, maybe we'll throw in some universal health care. If only Ben Shapiro put as much effort into coming up with actual solutions, like maybe a Republican take on gun reform, as he did with making excuses for why we can't do anything about this, because then I'd actually be debating whether his ideas are good or not. But he has no ideas. He only has distraction and spin, just like every single conservative pundit before him. Ben Shapiro can't save the GOP. I don't know if anyone can. The Republican Party has to reconcile with the fact that they're allowing a greedy, mentally unstable white nationalist into the Oval Office just to get them young tax cuts. Ben Shapiro transcends some of the messiness of what the right has become, but at what point will the Republican Party have gone too far for Ben Shapiro? What does Donald Trump have to do to lose Ben Shapiro, and why hasn't he been lost already? Ben Shapiro is the modern repackaging of the same slimy disingenuousness as all the other right-wing pundits before him, at a time when the American public has had it with lies and spin. If Ben Shapiro is the best the American right's got, the GOP is fucked.